Previously in our story, tensions inside the palace reached a breaking point. A 9-year-old crown prince stood against his own father, demanding an end to the crushing tributes that drained their people. His fiery words shocked the court, but instead of praise, he was punished brutally by the emperor himself. Yet even as he endured the whip without shedding a tear, his resolve only grew stronger. And just when things seemed to calm, another twist hit his younger brother. Innocent today is destined to become the bloodthirsty King Seijo, the very tyrant who will plunge Joseon into chaos. Can the crown prince's actions change history, or is tragedy inevitable? If you missed any part of this intense journey, the links to the full recent episodes are right there in the description. Don't forget to check them out before the next chapter drops. The ministers and Hyang cried out in alarm, "Father, please, wake up." At last, the emperor regained consciousness, pale and shaken. He stared at Hyang in disbelief. "So, you are telling me that you injected cow pus into your body?" Hyang answered calmly, "Yes, father," without hesitation. King Sejong, still unable to comprehend, thought of the cow and shook his head in disbelief. "You surely don't understand what pus is. There is no way." Before he could finish, Hyang laughed lightly. "It truly is pus, father. It oozes from the wounds of the cow." The emperor, struggling to control his anger, asked, "This procedure, you only applied it to your skin, correct?" Hyang replied bluntly, "No, father. I used a needle to inject it into my body." The emperor, consumed with rage, lunged forward, seized Hyang by the shoulders, and shouted, "You reckless child! How dare you do such a thing? Just because it is written in a book, you think you can follow it blindly?" Hyang tried to explain. "Father, I am fine. An experienced person performed the procedure on me." The emperor, stunned, demanded, "What? Who?" Hyang pointed. "Him." The farmer, trembling with fear, immediately bowed low. "Your Majesty, I am but a humble servant of the crown prince." Hyang then introduced the man. "This man will serve me in the future. No, I should say he is a shepherd from Niobe Island. He was the one who performed the procedure. He claimed it was a secret technique passed down for generations on the island to treat smallpox." King Song, still in disbelief, questioned a cattle herder. The farmer respectfully replied, "Yes, Your Majesty, that is correct." The emperor then approached Hyang gently and asked, "My crown prince, are you telling me this man is wise? You're speaking of that cattle herder?" Hong confidently answered, "Yes, father. He has cured all the people on his island." But the emperor raised his voice. "Even so, you should not have used yourself as a test subject for this treatment. What were you thinking? You are the crown prince." Hyang, refusing to back down, replied, "A life is a life, father. There is no nobility or commonness when it comes to life and death. Many people have been cured and restored to health, so why should I be afraid?" Still worried, the emperor pressed on. But this was far too reckless. What if something had gone wrong? Hyang sighed, pausing for a moment before speaking. "Father, you know as well as I do that far too many people in this country have lost their lives to smallpox. I believe it will eventually reach the palace. If I can prove that this treatment works, we can protect not only the citizens, but also the people we love. Don't you think so, father?" King Song, deeply moved by Hyang's words, stood silently for a long time. He thought to himself, "I truly cannot tell whether this child will become a blessing or a curse for Yoshun. His actions and thoughts are like those of a wise philosopher, yet at times he is like a relentless thunderbolt striking the same rock for 100 days without rest." Finally, the emperor gave an order. "Guards, take this man to prison. Make sure he is well fed and not tortured." He then turned to the cattle herder and declared, "If anything happens to the crown prince, I will take your life. But if your words prove true, you will be richly rewarded." The herder, trembling with fear, bowed and answered, "I understand, Your Majesty." Meanwhile, the Grand Inspector was speaking with the astronomer, Iron. "Have you heard about the Crown Prince?" he asked. "He claims to have been cured of smallpox by that lowly slave. The Crown Prince even injected that vile cow pus into himself." Iron replied, "It sounds unbelievable, but if it is the Crown Prince, he must have had his reasons. He creates what no one else even imagines. Besides, he always spends his time in study." Before Iron could finish, two men rushed past, shouting, "The Crown Prince!" Startled, Iron asked, "What's going on?" Yunko replied urgently, "It's serious, the Crown Prince is." At that very moment, the Crown Prince lay in bed, his body burning with a raging fever. "I'm fine," Hyung insisted. But his servants, anxious, exclaimed, "How can you say that? You're burning like a furnace." One of them muttered angrily, "That scoundrel Soto." Meanwhile, Soto was tied to a chair in the prison. The warden shouted furiously, "You insolent fool! How dare you endanger the Crown Prince by mocking the royal family?" Confused, Soto cried out, "What's going on?" The warden snapped back, "Still trying to lie? The Crown Prince is suffering terribly, as if at death's door." Realizing what they meant, Soto calmly said, "Ah, you must be speaking of the fever." The warden, startled, demanded, "What? How do you know about that?" Soto explained, "There's no need to worry. It is common for a high fever to last up to 5 days. But after 10 days, the Crown Prince will recover, as if his body has been completely cleansed." The warden, though skeptical, was shaken by the explanation. Yet Soto's words proved true. After exactly 10 days, Hyang was fully recovered, carrying on as though nothing had happened. Later, in the palace, Hong stood proudly before the emperor. "Look, father," he said, "I have completely overcome the threat of smallpox." The emperor, deep in thought, replied gravely, "I cannot be certain of that based on just this single incident." Hyang then suggested, "Allow me to go to a place where smallpox is currently spreading, and I will prove this method to you." The emperor immediately refused. "No, absolutely not." But Hyang pressed on. "Then how about this, father? Let us use this method to treat people in areas where outbreaks are occurring. I am confident that once the treatment is properly explained, those who receive it will recover." Suddenly, the Grand Inspector spoke up from behind. "Your Highness, we cannot proceed with this. It may simply be a coincidence. Moreover, isn't the Crown Prince's method essentially forcing people to undergo this treatment?" Hyang remained silent for a moment before replying. "Grand Inspector, this is what So Andu and his family have been practicing for decades. How can you call it a coincidence? And since participation in this method is entirely voluntary, there is no element of force. Everything in this world advances only through repeated trials and experiments. If we do not overcome our fear of failure, what will become of our kingdom?" Hearing this, no one spoke further. The Grand Inspector merely clicked his tongue in frustration, visibly angered. Following Hyang's suggestion, the regions most afflicted by smallpox were prioritized, and the treatment began. Those who feared the disease the most eagerly volunteered. The method's effectiveness would soon be proven. Furthermore, King Sajang ordered an investigation alongside the vaccination campaign, a strategy of 2 birds with 1 stone, combining immunization with a population census to verify the treatment's results. Once confirmed, King Sajang authorized its use throughout the Joseon kingdom. One day, while Hyang was walking, a voice called out, "Hyang, look, do you know what this is?" It was Yang Su. "That's Suggoa, traditional Korean sweets," Hyang replied. Yang Su smiled. "Correct. As a reward, I'll put on a little performance with these." Though not particularly skilled with instruments, Yang Su played anyway. Hyang endured it patiently, listening with a faint smile. "You shouldn't spend all your time studying," Yang Su teased. "You should appreciate the arts. By the way, have you gained a little weight recently?" At that moment, an attendant arrived. "Princess, it's time to go." Yang Su waved cheerfully. "See you later, Hyung." Hyung thought to himself, she always says whatever she likes, then leaves. Watching his sister's happy figure walk away, he smiled. "Still, it's good to see you healthy, sister." With the smallpox crisis largely under control, Hyung immersed himself in policy planning. He organized medical records into a book summarizing traditional remedies and agricultural knowledge. He also compiled another volume detailing farming methods suited to Joseon's climate. Beyond medicine and agriculture, Hyung proposed policies in other fields as well, including drafting a new map. Looking upon his accomplishments, Hyung smiled with quiet satisfaction. All of this will form the foundation for improving efficiency on a national scale. Though some ministers objected from time to time, Hyung often ignored their resistance, earning him the nickname the Sleepless Lord of the Six Ministries, a reference to the administrative center of Joseon's capital that never seemed to rest. The capital bustled day and night, living up to its reputation for tireless activity. One evening, as night fell, King Sajang gazed up at the starry sky, his mind weighed with countless thoughts. He turned to his guards. "Do not follow me anymore." The attendant, concerned, spoke softly. "But, Your Majesty." "It's fine," the king reassured. "I only wish to have a private conversation with my son." Glancing toward Hyung's quarters, he noticed the oil lamps still lit a sign the crown prince had not yet gone to bed. A court official stepped forward and reported, "I have heard that the crown prince often stays awake until 1 in the morning, sometimes even 3. Though it is advised to sleep by 11, he continues working late into the night." Puzzled, the emperor asked, "So Hyung has been working so hard?" Inside his quarters, the crown prince was still writing when the announcement came. "His Majesty has arrived." Setting down his pen, Hyung rose to greet him. "Father, what brings you here so late?" Song calmly entered. "I was taking a walk and noticed your lights were still on, so I came by. What are you working on so late?" Hyung answered honestly. "I'm reading a book, father." Curious, the emperor asked. "A Western book, is it? What's it about?" Hyung replied, "It's called The Art of Alchemy." The emperor, confused, asked, "Alchemy? What is that?" Hyung explained, "It is the study of transforming metals like iron or lead into gold using various methods." The emperor stroked his chin, deep in thought. "Turning iron into gold, is that possible?" Hyung admitted. "Unfortunately, according to the book, it isn't possible. But the experiments themselves hold meaning. Alchemy in the medieval period had a significant influence on the development of modern chemistry." Intrigued, King Song said, "Let me see that book." Hyung responded, "Of course, father. I even have a translated copy, if you'd like to read it together." Taking the book in his hands, the emperor skimmed through it and remarked, "I was only curious to see what Western writing looks like." A few hours later, Hyung was stifling yawns, longing for bed. Yet his father remained deeply engrossed in the book. Hyung was impressed. "Father, aren't you tired? You're so focused." The emperor, still studying, even praised the script. "This Western writing is fascinating," he said. Hyung, however, could not see the appeal. The emperor then called him over. "Come here, take a look." He pointed to a line of text on the page. Based on how this word appears in different places, it seems to refer to the subject of the sentence. And if you observe closely, most sentences begin with these letters. So, this part must correspond to the first syllable, this to the middle, and this to the final syllable of the word. Listening to his father's sharp observations, Hyung was stunned. This man is a genius now, a monster, he thought. In such a short time, father has already unraveled the structure, spelling, and meaning of Latin. Seeing his son fall silent, the emperor spoke. Isn't that right? Startled, He-young quickly responded. Yes, father, that's correct. King Song continued. These Western letters are quite different from Chinese characters. They all look similar, yet their meaning shifts depending on arrangement. He stroked his chin again, staring at the page. After a moment, he called his son's name. Yes, father, He-young answered immediately. The emperor began. Looking at this makes me wonder, what do you think of creating a writing system specifically for Joseon? He-young's eyes widened in surprise. I've long believed Joseon needs its own system of writing. Even among those who know Chinese characters, very few are truly proficient. The emperor hesitated before replying. But if I declare publicly that I intend to create a new writing system, the Hall of Worthies will immediately oppose me. The Hall of Worthies, established by King Song himself, was the central institution for research and policy, heavily influenced by Confucian scholars. Hearing this, He-young responded, But father, so many people can't even write a petition because they don't know the characters. If you explain your intentions properly, things will go smoothly. The emperor smiled at his son. It seems you've always struggled with writing characters, haven't you? He-young smiled awkwardly, silently agreeing it truly was difficult. The emperor reminisced. I remember the first time I tried to write a sentence. It was such a struggle. I spent 2 hours composing just one poem, and when your grandfather saw it, he burst out laughing. He then stood, walked to the door, and said, It seems I've stayed too long. You should go to bed now. He-young bowed. Yes, father. You should also rest. Joseon needs you healthy. The emperor, pleased, looked at his son with affection. This boy, I hope you reach the age of 15 soon. He-young, confused, did not understand what his father meant, but the emperor only smiled kindly. Go to sleep. The next morning, He-young stood before the royal court and addressed the emperor. The 6 ministries must be fully separated, and each ministry should record its work in detail. If records are kept only in chronological order, future generations will waste far too much time searching for what they need. The emperor turned to the court officials and asked, Does anyone hold a different opinion? They responded in unison. We agree with the crown prince's suggestion. After considering it, the emperor said, I also believe this is a wise proposal. Ministers, I understand why certain policies were enacted in the past, but future generations will only be able to comprehend these decisions through written records. From this day forward, each ministry's minister must organize and classify official records according to the crown prince's instructions. The officials bowed and replied in unison, We obey, Your Majesty. After the strategy meeting concluded, everyone was dismissed. The Grand Inspector and the Grand Historian walked out together, though both appeared displeased. The Grand Historian furrowed his brows. This is troubling. Now the Crown Prince is interfering even with the record-keeping of the 6 ministries. We are the ones burdened with the extra work. The Grand Inspector nodded. Exactly. Are not all matters already being recorded in the official annals by the royal historians, as well as in the daily journals of the Secretariat for State Affairs? The Secretariat Journal already documents the king's daily life and his interactions with the bureaucracy. The Grand Historian agreed. That is true. This only doubles our workload without purpose. The Grand Inspector added, Even without these changes, we have been overwhelmed recently all because of the Crown Prince. At this pace, he will eventually cause a great problem. Frankly, if this continues, the court's atmosphere will shift drastically. One day, the Crown Prince may undo everything he has worked so hard to establish. The Grand Historian countered, It will not come to that. The Crown Prince still possesses moral principles. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince was brimming with enthusiasm. This is reform, a true reform. I will completely abolish these vile old customs. Just thinking of it excites me. I will no longer tolerate this bureaucratic nonsense. Once was enough. Back with the two ministers, the Grand Inspector continued, but all of the Crown Prince's proposals defy tradition. What if, by chance, he revives a shadow from the past? Suddenly, a voice interrupted. That will never happen. The two ministers, startled, quickly bowed. It was Chief Minister Ryu Yanyan. With a stern expression, he declared, "Many who have read only a few books believe themselves qualified to discuss matters of state. Yet most of these fools understand nothing of the world. If the Crown Prince crosses the line and endangers all we have built, then even though he is the Crown Prince, I will not stand idly by." The scene shifted to the royal court, where King Sa-jang opened the morning session. I imagine returning from the Ming dynasty must have been difficult. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty," replied the Grand Inspector respectfully. The king asked, "What is the status of the Rasen embassy?" Another official reported, "After discussions, the Ming dynasty has agreed to permit the establishment of a Rasen embassy in Shandong province." Hearing this, King Sa-jang appeared relieved. "I see. Did anything notable occur during the journey?" The official answered, "Yes. Many Ming merchants expressed a desire to purchase Joseon paper from us." "Paper?" the Crown Prince repeated, seeking confirmation. The Grand Inspector elaborated, "Yes, Your Majesty. Our paper is of far superior quality compared to that of the Ming dynasty. They requested that we bring more on our next visit." King Sa-jang considered briefly and appeared ready to issue an order to increase production at the paper mills. Instead, he simply said, "Very well, you may return to your seat." At that moment, Hyung, feeling confident, saw an opportunity and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I have something to say." With that single sentence, the officials around him broke into a cold sweat. Here we go again, they thought. "What is it this time?" King Sa-jang asked with hesitation. "Must you speak now?" "Yes, father," Hyung replied with determination. Seeing his son's resolve, the king allowed him to proceed. "Very well, go ahead." Calmly, Hyung declared, "I request that we shut down the paper mill." The entire court was stunned, their jaws nearly dropping to the floor. How could he suggest shutting down the paper mill when so many in the Ming dynasty were eager to buy Joseon paper? Was this not completely contrary to the Crown Prince's earlier stance? This was an opportunity to secure new income for the kingdom, so why close it? Hyung, hearing their murmurs, cursed silently to himself. "Shut up, all of you, and let me speak." The Crown Prince then addressed the court. "The decision to shut down the paper mill," he declared, "is entirely consistent with my views." King Song, intrigued, asked, "Then explain your reasoning." Hyung respectfully began, "Yes, father. As you know, Joseon paper is of exceptional quality thanks to our skilled craftsmen. However, I have learned that these artisans are not fairly compensated for their work. It is said their wages are so low that they cannot even support their families. As a result, many have taken on additional jobs or even abandoned their craft altogether, becoming tenant farmers or turning to other trades." Hearing this, Ryu Yonyan's expression grew serious. Hyang continued, "In such a situation, if the workload increases and management becomes stricter, even more workers will abandon their positions." But Ryu Yonyan quickly interrupted. "This problem exists because those workers are simply lazy. In military factories and other royal workshops, employees are granted the 9th rank and receive the corresponding wages. Yet very few of those officials ever resign. That means lack of money cannot be used as an excuse for their indolence." Hyung, growing angry, furrowed his brow. "Are you not aware," he retorted, "that the officials you speak of receive many additional unofficial benefits? Even at your residence, Lord Ryu, people visit from dawn, and your house is always full of guests." Ryu Yonyan maintained his stance. "That is simply an expression of gratitude, a gesture of goodwill from them." "I am not saying that is wrong," Hyung countered immediately. But if we continue to ignore the efforts of the paper craftsmen, how can they be expected to fully dedicate themselves to their work? If things continue in this way, not only will we fail to advance our technology, but Joseon's paper-making traditions may vanish forever along with these artisans. In the end, King Sa-jang seemed to agree. The Crown Prince is right. But Ryu Yun-yan, with a stern expression, pressed further. Does the Crown Prince know that it was King Taejong who established the paper mill? That was because the paper collected for currency was of inconsistent quality, making organization extremely difficult. If we abolish the paper mill, we will face that challenge again. I urge the Crown Prince to reconsider. Caught between two opposing arguments, King Song grew conflicted. What should we do now? He wondered. At that moment, Hee-young glanced at him, giving a subtle signal. You know what to do, right? I trust you, father. Suddenly, Hee-young's expression shifted from resolute to blank as he studied his father's face. The old man, King Song, turned to him again and asked, What do you think? This made the Crown Prince pause. When did father develop this habit of pushing difficult questions onto me? He thought. Does he want me to engage more in these discussions? With a sigh, Hee-young answered firmly. Have the ministers forgotten about the gold-nibbed pens? The court clearly outlined the required standards, 3 cha wide, 2 cha high. The paper must not be overly rough, and its color must be as bright as peach blossoms. We hire craftsmen to meet these standards and yet demand the lowest price. Hearing this, Ryu Yun-yan hesitated. But what about the costs? Hee-young pressed on. Let me give you an example with the gold-nibbed pens. By recognizing these craftsmen as royal merchants, their business will thrive. The court can then collect taxes from their profits, earning far more than the initial costs. Moreover, if Joseon's merchants had to compete on paper quality, the standard would rise, attracting even more Ming Dynasty traders seeking our paper. The officials fell silent. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. In my opinion, the Crown Prince's proposal is quite reasonable. It was none other than the Minister of Revenue, who continued, The Joseon dynasty has been established for nearly 3 years now, yet this issue has never been resolved. If costs keep rising and now we have a solution, why not use it? Ryu Yun-yan harshly rebuked him. Minister of Revenue, watch your words. Are you forgetting that everyone must follow the teachings of the sages for the nation to remain at peace? Then, turning to King Song, he added, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's suggestion may be correct, but it is only a temporary solution. For lasting peace and prosperity, we must prioritize the moral education of the people. Another official suddenly spoke up. Your Majesty, what the Grand Inspector just said is nothing more than empty theory. How can the people grasp the teachings of the sages when they are suffering in poverty? Education is important, yes, but we can only teach the people once they have enough to eat. This remark ignited a heated debate among the officials. You're a high-ranking official, how can you say that? Another cried out. Watching the commotion, Hee-young smirked quietly to himself. Interesting. Perhaps I should invent popcorn for moments like this. Now let's see how father reacts. Noticing King Song raise his hand as if preparing to make a decision, the Crown Prince thought to himself, Don't tell me he's going to hand the responsibility to me again. The king's voice boomed across the hall. Stop! I've heard enough from all of you. Yes, educating the people is essential, but ensuring their livelihood is equally important. I expect all of you to come up with various solutions to address this. With the king's command issued, no one dared to object. The officials had no choice but to bow their heads and reply, We will follow your Majesty's orders. King Song continued. As for the paper mill issue, I believe the Crown Prince's proposal is valid, but shutting it down immediately may not be appropriate. Therefore, come up with a more comprehensive solution and report back to me. The officials once again responded in unison, We will comply. After giving his instructions, King Song turned to his beloved son. "Crown Prince, listen carefully." "Yes, father," Hong responded respectfully, bowing. The king then said, "I know you care deeply about the prosperity of the kingdom and the well-being of the people. As the crown prince, it is your duty to concern yourself with such matters. For that, I won't reprimand you. In fact, I commend you." Han outwardly expressed gratitude, but inside he thought, "I just got scolded though." King Song continued, addressing a concern that had been on his mind. "But every time you speak, there are always people opposing your ideas. That's a problem. Both the ministers and I often don't understand the reasoning behind your suggestions. That's why I believe you need to explain your political philosophy clearly when presenting your ideas." Upon hearing the words political philosophy, Ryu Yun-yun's face darkened. King Song added, "You will do this in the main hall, in front of all officials of rank 3 and higher, including all the ministers. Can you do this?" Sensing the opportunity growing closer, Hyong couldn't hide his excitement. "So father wants me to give a full presentation, huh?" With confidence, Hyong immediately responded, "Yes, father. I only need 5 days to prepare." After the assembly concluded and everyone left the main hall, the ministers began to share their doubts. How could a child possibly have a political philosophy? One questioned. "I can't understand what His Majesty is thinking," another added. "No matter how brilliant the crown prince is, he is still just a child. Even with all the preparation in the world, it will be very difficult for him to convince the ministers." "I agree, even if the crown prince spends all 5 days preparing meticulously." At that moment, Ryu Yun-yun interjected, "No, we must prepare ourselves thoroughly as well." The group turned to face Yun-yun, realizing he was already formulating a plan. "It's not just about the Confucian classics. We also need to understand the policies of other nations." One official felt this level of preparation was unnecessary. "But he's only 9 years old. Do we really need to go to such lengths?" Yun-yun emphasized his point again. "Have you forgotten what that 9-year-old has put us through already? The crown prince may be the one speaking, but it's clear these ideas reflect His Majesty's thinking as well. Until now, has His Majesty ever opposed the crown prince's ideas?" Connecting the dots, the official had to admit, "It's true, that has never happened." Yun-yun noted, "Yes, the crown prince may only be 9, but we must remember the one behind him is His Majesty, so we must prepare carefully. Don't forget how we built Joseon. We cannot allow the bad habits of past kings to return." At the censorate, a voice rang out. "What do you think?" The chief censor raised his voice. "Regardless, we must file an official remonstrance first. How can we allow a 9-year-old to discuss political matters?" Amidst the many voices plotting to bring down Hyong, there was one man who recognized the prince's talent. "But from the gold-nibbed pen incident, we've seen that the crown prince truly has ability." Before he could finish, the chief censor angrily cut him off. "That's what frustrates me the most. I should have opposed it when the crown prince suggested using the gold-nibbed pens for trade. Ever since that incident, His Majesty and the ministers have only cared about money. Now all I can do is regret not standing firm. We must write a memorial opposing the crown prince immediately." "Yes, we must act at once," the ministers echoed in agreement. The chief censor sprang into action, leading everyone outside. Meanwhile, in another setting, an official reported to King Song. In summary, most of the officials didn't react favorably to the crown prince's proposal. The king grew irritated, pulling at his ears in frustration. Why are they all so stubborn and conservative? The official continued. Most disappointing were the young officials from the censorate and inspectorate. I expected Yun Yan to oppose it, given his experience and knowledge, but even the younger officials of the censorate seemed to blindly follow Neo-Confucian teachings. However, they all acknowledge that the crown prince is very intelligent and determined. So many also admit his talent. After hearing the report, King Yongyon's expression darkened. With a serious tone, he muttered, "I have no trust in the talents left. No one at all." Meanwhile, back in the palace, the Crown Prince Hyung was reflecting on recent events. "We're lacking talented individuals. Truly lacking. Those old-fashioned ministers are too rigid," he mused. Suddenly, the eunuch beside him asked, "Your Highness, what does old-fashioned mean?" Hyung quickly brushed it off. "Never mind, I wasn't talking to you." At that moment, Hyung was consumed with many thoughts. It's not even the later years of the dynasty, this is just the beginning of the Joseon era. The ruling class should still be flexible, right? How on earth am I supposed to convince those stubborn, hard-headed ministers? And on top of that, Father said he'd summon all the high-ranking officials, including those at the third rank. I'll be presenting my views to people who will undoubtedly look down on me, just because I'm still a child. After thinking it over for a while, Hyung came to a resolution. Fine then, I'll show them a taste of 21st century capitalism and modern management structures. Without wasting any time, he began to prepare. "Eunuch, I need to prepare something. Take me to the Bureau of Graphics and the weapon storage." "Yes, Your Highness," the eunuch replied respectfully, thinking to himself, what will the Crown Prince come up with this time? 5 days later, at the main hall of Gyeongbokgung Palace, the ministers and high-ranking officials had gathered in full. As they mingled, one approached another with a friendly greeting. "Minister Choi, it's been a while." The other responded cheerfully, "Minister Park, how long has it been? When did you return to the capital?" "I arrived just yesterday," Park replied. Their conversation quickly turned to the day's topic. "His Majesty summoned us to hear the Crown Prince's political views, didn't he?" "Yes," Park sighed. "What a waste of time. Why did we even have to come here for this?" Yun Haen, another official, nodded in agreement. "Indeed, I imagine most of the ministers feel the same." At that moment, the announcement rang out, "His Majesty, the King, has arrived." King Yongyeon entered the hall and took his seat on the throne. Getting straight to the point, he addressed the ministers. "As you all know, the Crown Prince has recently made several proposals. However, I believe we cannot fully evaluate them without understanding their foundation. Therefore, I've gathered you all here to listen to the Crown Prince's political philosophy. I hope you'll listen attentively and guide him, so that he doesn't stray from the right path." The ministers all responded in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." From the distance, the sound of footsteps grew louder as Hyung confidently made his way forward, servants following behind him carrying mysterious items. The sight piqued the minister's curiosity. "What is that?" someone muttered. Once Hyung stood before his father, he bowed respectfully. "I thank you, Father, for giving me this opportunity. Now, I will begin presenting my political views." "Proceed," the king instructed. After hearing this, Hyung clapped his hands. The reform petition for the household staff was immediately opened. The young prince grabbed the loudspeaker and spoke confidently. 1, 2. Can everyone hear me clearly? 1, 2. Witnessing this, everyone was stunned. What is this? Why is the prince's voice so loud? What is that thing? The young man continued. Thanks to the opportunity granted by my father, I am now able to meet all of you, ministers. So without further delay, let's begin. The room fell silent as everyone listened carefully to Hyung's political presentation. He used various drawings as evidence, confidently expressing his stance. To achieve the best outcome for humanity, I will get straight to the point. The foundation of my political philosophy is to achieve the best result for all humankind. As you may know, this was also the ideology of Wang Zhen when establishing the Goryeo dynasty. This aligns with the fundamental principles of wise rulers, specifically the royal way, and putting the people at the core. To achieve this, first and foremost, The well-being of the people must be guaranteed, and they must live in peace. However, our country has very little flat land, while the mountains are steep and rugged. Therefore, the common people are forced to gather on the limited flatlands. With so little land for agriculture, won't the people become even more impoverished? Thus, we must actively encourage not just agriculture, but also handicrafts and trade, so that the country can develop, and we can purchase what we lack from foreign nations. Hearing these words, some were left with mouths agape in astonishment, while others burst into laughter. Some remained silent, waiting for what would come next. Hyung drew a diagram and continued, "Therefore, we must reform the current 6 ministries and local government systems. To preserve our good traditions, all the systems we have been using up until now must be changed. So first of all, in the future we must abolish the 6-ministry system and replace it with 3 larger bodies, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, and establish positions within those 3 bodies. Secondly, we need to reform local governments. Instead of overburdening a single person with all the work, officials will share the tasks among themselves. Thirdly, we must establish an education system to help people escape poverty. We need to organize basic education to ensure that everyone knows the most essential knowledge. In addition, we need to exploit gold and silver mines, ensure fair tax collection, and reform the land system." At this point, everyone felt enlightened. It's even more revolutionary than I imagined. Just as I thought, the prince is a mad genius. Seeing the minister's amusing expressions, Hyung couldn't help but feel amused. If you're surprised now, it's still too early. There's a long way to go before I can rediscover my old joys. Inside the main hall of Manhwa, the young boy confidently presented, "That is my political stance." After his speech, the old men around him were all astonished that a mere 9-year-old child could speak so. Even Junin had to admit the boy was incredibly talented. "It's truly remarkable. Did you come up with all of that yourself?" Hyung frankly admitted. "No, father," the boy replied. "I referenced the classics of wise sages, and I've also read books from the West." The man, feeling a bit flustered, responded, "You truly brought up many things I hadn't even thought about. Although since the founding of the own dynasty many systems and methods have changed, there are still many that remain unchanged." The boy humbly replied, "Father, you give me too much credit. The Westerners have a saying, 'New wine should be put into new bottles.' It's been 35 years since the founding of the Juan dynasty by the great ancestor, but the people still suffer as before. That's why I believe we need reform for the future of all people." Nihan echoed his last words, observing the gloomy faces of the ministers. With a louder voice, Hyung declared, "Yes, for the future of everyone." Finally, the man officially announced, "That concludes the presentation of the Crown Prince's political views." Leaving the main hall, everyone remained completely silent. At that moment, someone broke the solemn atmosphere. "What do you think?" Ying Hong, clearly dissatisfied, replied. "What do I think? My mind feels completely blocked. We must immediately submit a petition to stop him. The Crown Prince uses grand words like 'for the future of everyone' to hide his true self while disregarding our values and traditions. Not only that, but he follows legalism rather than Confucianism. I am deeply saddened by this." After hearing this, the people around him also chimed in. "I think so too. How could the Crown Prince come up with such a reckless idea?" Even some officials from the imperial court reacted similarly. "We must submit a petition to prevent this at once." S was the first to voice his opposition to Hyung's ideas. On the surface, the Crown Prince's words sound reasonable, but in reality he is trying to revive the tyranny of Qin Shi Huang. "We must stop him," the group continued their discussion. "But His Highness seems very fond of the Crown Prince. Even so, we cannot allow this dynasty to collapse, can we?" Suddenly S had a dangerous thought. Lowering his voice, he said, "If the worst-case scenario occurs, we will have no choice but to depose the Crown Prince." The man was left stunned by what he heard. "Isn't that a bit too serious?" Suam remained firm in his stance after hearing the Crown Prince's presentation. You still think this isn't serious? Even His Highness didn't think this way from the start. Before he could finish his sentence, someone quickly covered his mouth and whispered in warning, "Watch your words. Do you think your neck is made of iron?" Sunam, angered, pushed the hand away and stubbornly retorted, "Am I wrong? How could a mere 9-year-old child say such nonsense? We need to hold those who have been educating the Crown Prince accountable, and even His Highness too. Discipline has always been the most important thing. If all they do is praise him, the consequences will be dire." The man quickly interjected, "Then you should just say that we need to tighten the discipline of the Crown Prince, but talk of dethroning him." Suam shouted angrily, "Look at the situation we're in right now. Do you think it's not too late already? We must depose him immediately. Only then can we follow the righteous path." Hearing this, many became uncomfortable. On the other hand, quite a few ministers agreed with the Crown Prince's views. They happily conversed with one another. "It's been a while since we felt so relieved." "I agree with you. We usually had to listen to endless nonsense, but now we're hearing practical suggestions for what Rhone needs at this very moment. It feels like my mind has finally cleared." "Did you see His Highness's expression? He looked like he wanted to implement those policies right away. I never imagined the Crown Prince would be this outstanding. With him, our kingdom of Yoshin will—" Before the man could finish, they suddenly ran into another group. At that moment, everyone split into two factions, one supporting the Crown Prince, the other not. As they passed each other, the opposing side muttered, "They're nothing but loud-mouthed hypocrites." The supporters shot back, "And they're authoritarian hypocrites. Shameful." These words stirred anger. "Let's go. Arguing with that lot is a waste of time. Let's write a petition. That's the only solution." They think we don't know how to write petitions? We'll write one too. By late afternoon, Hyang met with Chong Neo and was showered with praise. "Your presentation today was excellent." "Thank you, Father," the boy replied joyfully. "I've said this before, but your ideas have brought up many things I hadn't considered. There are so many policies I want to implement right away." Hyang responded, "You flatter me, Father, but to be honest, those policies are difficult to implement right away." Junin quickly answered, "I know. I've always thought that we, as father and son, should discuss policy matters more often. Besides, I'm concerned about the number of petitions we'll receive tomorrow. The Supreme Council is going to have a rough day." The young boy sighed, and his father replied, "I'll send some food over to the council." The next morning, in front of the council, two men stood frozen at the sight before them. "They're really diligent, aren't they?" "Yes. Did they stay up all night? They're quite impressive. I don't even dare step inside. Standing here talking won't make the workload lighter. Hurry up and start sorting." "Sorting?" "Yes. Some are criticizing the Crown Prince while others support him. We'll split these into two piles." "I understand." Meanwhile, Chung Neon's face showed deep exhaustion as he looked at the towering stack of petitions. "So many. You've really been hard at work. Let me start reading." He pulled out a petition and began carefully reviewing it. His expression hardened. His hand clenched in anger. Immediately, he called out, "Fang Th." "Yes, Your Highness," the man replied meekly. "Summon the Crown Prince." Jinho bowed before the emperor. "Father, you called for me." "Yes, I did. You may rise." The emperor picked up a scroll. "I summoned you because it seems quite a few officials did not understand what you said yesterday." Suddenly, his voice grew sharp. "LG Chin." "Yes, Your Highness," the man quickly responded. The emperor's face was grim. Holding up the petition, he commanded, "This is your petition. Read it aloud for the Crown Prince to hear." The atmosphere grew tense as officials stole glances at one another. Your Highness, LG Chin hesitated. "Take it." The one being questioned should hear directly from you to avoid any misunderstandings." With no choice, the old man obeyed. After receiving the scroll, he began to read. "I, O Yingheng, the LG Qin, humbly submit this petition to His Highness the Emperor cut him off. "Skip the formalities and get to the point." Terrified, the old man paled but continued. "The Crown Prince's political views, while seemingly correct, contain many inappropriate elements. First, our kingdom adheres to Neo-Confucianism. However, the ideas proposed by the Crown Prince are more aligned with legalist philosophy. Legalist principles are too strict, causing suffering for the people and harming the nation. Second, the Crown Prince has suggested removing restrictions on concubine-born children. These rules, established by King Tijun, distinguish between the children of primary wives and concubines. To abolish them carelessly would be an act of great filial disrespect. Moreover, if concubine-born children are allowed to become officials, as proven by previous dynasties, they will abuse their power. The Crown Prince suggested increasing the number of officials, but the more officials there are, the heavier the burden will be on the people. In his opinion, if local officials find the workload too heavy, they should simply ask local scholars for assistance." After finishing, he looked up and added, "These 3 points are the unreasonable aspects of the Crown Prince's political views." Jinho listened carefully, his brows furrowed. The old man continued reading, but the tension was palpable. After he finished, the Crown Prince asked the Emperor, "May I respond, Father?" Yin Yun clenched his fists in anger after receiving a sharp glance from the Crown Prince. Hearing the request, the Emperor replied, "I grant you permission to respond." The Crown Prince stood alone between 2 rows of officials and confidently addressed each point. "First, you stated that Neo-Confucianism is the guiding philosophy of our kingdom. However, the true philosophy of our country, according to the teachings of the sages, is the royal way, with the people at its core. Neo-Confucianism is merely a tool we use to achieve that. If we only focus on it, we will limit ourselves too much, won't we?" He continued, "For example, if the royal way is a plate, then philosophies and systems of rules are the bowls. Is it really necessary to differentiate between these tools when applying the royal way?" The officials were stunned by his words. One of them, trembling, attempted to interrupt, but the Crown Prince boldly continued. "Neo-Confucianism is just one branch of Confucianism. Is it not too restrictive to focus solely on that?" His words were so persuasive that even though LG Qin was furious, he could only grit his teeth in frustration. The Crown Prince pressed on. "Second, you mentioned that concubine-born children would abuse their power. But were they the only ones to abuse power in past dynasties?" Yin Yun, unable to bear it, called out loudly, "Your Highness!" But the Crown Prince continued without pausing. "Isn't it true that everyone from prominent families, whether firstborn or concubine-born, has engaged in corruption? Isn't it unjust to lay all the blame on concubine-born children? Moreover, doesn't the law clearly state that all those who take concubines are guilty as well? Yet most of the ministers here have concubines, do they not?" The officials glanced at each other, and the air grew even heavier. The Crown Prince wasn't finished. Hasn't it become a habit for prominent families to bury their own mistakes while continuing to discriminate against the children of concubines? Who would have thought you could speak so bluntly? The officials could only bow their heads in silence, speechless. "And third," Hyung continued, his hand clenched into a fist, "you mentioned that local officials could ask local scholars for help if they have too much work, correct? Since the time I began sitting next to my father and observing how he handles state affairs, I've heard countless reports from many places about unfortunate people dying of starvation. But I have never once heard of local scholars stepping in to help the starving or opening the grain stores to aid them." Suddenly, he emphasized, "And not only that. Instead of helping the people solve their problems, they exploit the drought, charging interest rates higher than the standard rate. Time and again, the people have no choice but to sell their lives or become refugees while their land is taken from them. Tell me this, Yin Yun, LG Chin, who is more fearsome than a tiger to the powerless common people? Is it the government officials or the local scholars? Yin Yun was startled, his face pale as he bowed his head. The emperor glanced at him, waiting for an answer. When none came, the emperor spoke. I'd like to hear your answer too, LG Chin. Respond. Yin Yun was drenched in sweat, his body trembling as he bit his lip. Unable to utter a word, Jinho pressed further. Why are you silent, LG Chin? Under immense pressure, Yin Yun finally muttered, It's the local scholars. The other officials tensed upon hearing this. The emperor then added, The petitions from the others are very similar to that of LG Chin. Different people submitted them, but the content is nearly identical. How amusing. He then picked up a yellow scroll and said, But this one is different. Crown Prince, read it. Jinho bowed and received the scroll. Yes, father. He opened it and quickly scanned through its contents. Suddenly, his eyes widened and his brows furrowed. Noticing this, the emperor asked, What do you think? Jinho exhaled and recited some of the contents aloud. There is no enjoyment in this. If we encourage the people to enjoy luxuries, society will descend into a state that promotes extravagance, where wealth is worshipped instead of morality. That's why the sages of old divided society into 4 classes: scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Standing tall, he solemnly declared, I believe the person who wrote this petition should be severely punished, father. The officials were taken aback. Once again, the crown prince insisted on punishment himself. They thought, startled. Jinho began to explain. First of all, in all the political writings of Red, there is no wise sage who mentions dividing society into such rigid classes. But by lying in this way, this person is trying to deceive the ruler. This is an act of disloyalty, and such a person must be punished severely. The official who wrote the petition was so furious he almost exploded. Unable to contain himself, he raised his voice. Crown Prince, the one who wrote this petition did so out of concern for the nation. If you punish someone for giving honest counsel just because you dislike them, you will alienate everyone. Jinho quickly turned and rebutted. This isn't honest counsel. It's a deliberate attempt to cause division, fabricating teachings that don't exist. How can that be considered counsel? The official retorted, Since ancient times, the sages have warned that extravagance is a disease that will destroy a nation. We must avoid it at all costs. How can you say that extravagance is better than frugality? At this, Jinho fully turned to face him and said, Let me explain it to you again. Did the sages teach that the nobility had the right to exploit the people? Did they teach that it was acceptable to lend grain at interest rates over 50%? The official was speechless. Jinho pointed directly at him. More and more people are selling themselves into slavery because the interest rates are so high. Are you saying I should let this continue just because it has always been this way? Grand Censor, how dare you think like that and call yourself a servant of the own dynasty? Suddenly, the emperor slammed the table. Jinho, realizing his mistake, quickly bowed his head. I apologize, father. I overstepped. The emperor immediately corrected him. Even if what you say is right, you must not be disrespectful. That's enough. Jinho replied, Thank you for your mercy, father. The emperor shifted his gaze and said, Grand Inspector, step forward. The Grand Inspector quickly stepped forward. Yes, your highness. The emperor commanded, Give the Grand Inspector the petition. There is a part the crown prince hasn't read. After the Grand Inspector took the petition from Jinho, the emperor continued, This petition was written by someone in the inspectorate. The Grand Inspector read it aloud. He opened the scroll and, after a brief glance, his face turned pale, his fingers gripping the paper tightly. Without hesitation, he knelt and kowtowed. Your Highness, this was the opinion of one individual, not the entire inspectorate. The entire court held its breath for the Grand Inspector. The Emperor looked at him and said, "I know. That's why the Crown Prince didn't read that part, and neither will I." The Grand Inspector, trembling, expressed his gratitude. "Thank you, Your Highness, for your mercy." Finally, the Emperor concluded, "As for the punishment for the author of this petition, I will think about it carefully." After the court session ended, someone called out to the Grand Inspector. It was the Grand Censor, who curiously asked what was in that petition. The Grand Inspector didn't respond and quickly walked away, ignoring the Grand Censor's repeated calls. Shortly after, an official was suddenly grabbed by the collar. The Grand Inspector, enraged, shouted, "You scoundrel! How dare you!" The surrounding officials rushed to stop him. "Please, my lord, calm down, get out of my way," the bewildered official pleaded. The Grand Inspector yelled, "This bastard will ruin us all." The official asked, "What do you mean, my lord? What are you talking about?" The Grand Inspector snarled, "You fool! Who do you think you are, suggesting the Crown Prince be deposed?